boys, this is about to get real spicy real quick. Welcome back to FCW Tech. I'm your host Isaiah, and this is going to be a really fun video for me to make. Alright, let's just get that right out of the way because I love talking about these company fails. They're certainly very disappointing, that is for sure. They are mind-boggling, but they are really fun to recount some of the craziest, most dumbfounding, dumbfounding, I don't think that's a word, but I'm speechless at some of these fails. The companies can be so dumb sometimes. They might not think before they act, which makes no sense because they have so many people and so many different departments and stuff has to go through, but sometimes stuff slips through. There's some disastrous products, some disastrous company incidents out there, so yeah. Let me just say also, you may notice I'm not using my shotgun mic right now. The microphone quality may be a bit worse. My PC is currently, I have to swap out all my parts from my current case to my Fantex P500A. So I can't record my shotgun mic into my PC with XLR because my PC is upstairs. So I am using the built-in mic on my iPhone for this video. You also may have noticed I have not done any videos in quite a while. It's been at least 3 weeks. That is because, of course, I have school. And I'm doing an insane amount of extracurriculars. I'm the officers of a bunch of clubs. I'm prepping for the SAT. I'm practicing driving. So I do have a lot going on in my life right now. I'm very sorry that I'm not getting out videos. But I worked really hard this weekend to get this one out for you guys. This is being recorded on Sunday. It probably won't be out on Sunday. We'll see. So with that being said, let's finally get into the meat and potatoes of this video. PC companies have had some disastrous launches, product failures, and PR nightmares over the years. Today I will go over 10 of my favorite mistakes that make me facepalm every time. Each one deserves its own video, but today I will just give a brief overview of each flop. Keep in mind that I am new in the PC community, so there may be dramas from many years ago that I missed and never knew about. Starting with a mild fail, so this is the top 10, this is number 10, one will be the worst, this is number 10. Razer's product markups are bad, but none are as unbelievable as the $800 Razer Raptor 27-inch monitor, now down to $600 after some negative coverage. Razer has a history of being more of a lifestyle brand, similar to Apple, with much of the cost being attributed to the cult following surrounding Razer. When Hardware Unboxed reviewed Razer's high-end Raptor monitor, which is also the company's only display, they found some disappointing results for the aggressive marketing claims. The seemingly high-end monitor actually performs more like a $300 monitor. It features lackluster response time performance, lack of features such as variable overdrive, and mediocre colors, contrast, and brightness. Despite being advertised as factory calibrated, the calibration was not great. The cable management channels on the back of the monitor are cool, but that's about it. Razer also displays a fake picture on their website of the monitor having thinner bezels than the final product actually has, which is misleading. When I was listing off all the reasons that I haven't been doing videos, I'm also playing a sport. I'm running cross country now, and I might be doing sports like all year, so I've just got a lot going on. You won't see too many videos. Anyways, next. Enermax is a slightly less popular AIO company than Corsair and NZXT, but they still certainly garnered a lot of publicity when living bacteria started growing in their AIOs. Gamers Nexus did an in-depth expose showing that Enermax LickTech TR4 AIOs suffered from corrosion and potential growth of mold that caused the AIOs to overheat and fail. The gasket broke and impeded the flow of water as well, meaning that this AIO series was a dreadful fail overall. In response, Enermax has agreed to replace the affected coolers and pay for the shipping. Considering the product failed after 1 to 2 years, this is the bare minimum response. The most infamous event in PC building history is the release and subsequent tearing apart of Stéphane Etienne's PC build for the Verge. Mistakes that made it into the video, which Etienne later stated had been rushed, included suggestion to use a Swiss Army knife to screw things in, failure to mention why the top PCIe slot is important, failure to even mention that non-modular PSUs exist, excessive application of thermal paste, bad cable management, and more. Let's just say that I would not be surprised if more than one person who followed this guide had some issues down the line. Many PC enthusiasts such as Bitwit, Christopher Yee, and TechYes City reacted to this controversial build after its release, dumping more fuel on the fire. What makes this debacle worse is that months after the backlash, Etienne continued to bash the PC building community and defend his actions on his live streams.
I work for a big publication. Basically, I made a PC video and some very angry nerds are very angry with how I built the computer, but it still works, so...
Recently, Etienne went on LTT to fix the issues with his PC build guide and make up for his mistakes. He stated that his lawyer had told him it would be best to defend his actions and not concede. The guy seems to have finally regained the respect of the PC community, but wow, what a mess. ASRock is a longtime manufacturer of motherboards and graphics cards. They're specifically known for budget motherboards. Now they have expanded their product stack to the higher end, and they are generally well respected in the community. However, in 2020, Hardware Unboxed took a look at ASRock's budget Z490 motherboards, and what they found was pretty shocking. And Hardware Unboxed and Gamers Nexus are going to show up a lot in this piece. So, ASRock claimed, quote, unmatched overclocking capabilities, end quote, on their website for their budget Z490 boards, a claim they later removed. But their Phantom Gaming 4 and Pro 4 options could not handle a stock 10900K or even an overclocked 10600K. So did ASRock concede, apologize, and offer refunds for their budget boards? Of course not. Instead, they blacklisted Hardware Unboxed from receiving review samples. The results were backed up when Steve looked at ASRock B560 boards in 2021. The B560M HDV comes with a hard CPU power limit of 100 watts and does not support 125 watt K SKUs. When Hardware Unboxed put the 125 watt 11600K in the socket, the board completely ignored the base spec and ran it as a 65 watt locked chip despite ASRock claiming, quote, premium power chokes, end quote, and support for 125 watt CPUs. This is false advertising, and ASRock is lying to their customers, make no mistake about it. Even some of ASRock's higher-end boards have been found to be lacking in VRM quality, so I'd probably stay away at this point from most ASRock motherboards. NVIDIA is trusted for a reason. They are one of two big brands competing for dominance of the consumer graphics card space, and they have reliably launched good product after good product for years. The RTX 3090 overall is a great card, but with one concerning blemish, besides its ridiculous price. The card was exposed when it was found that the VRAM was consistently hitting 110 degrees Celsius under load and throttling the card, especially during casual crypto mining. Even during standard gaming sessions, the memory temps often get over 90 degrees. Do you know how hard it is to achieve memory temps this bad? In some cases, we're talking like 115 degrees Celsius. So this is no small feat for the GPU giant. Replacing the thermal pads inside the card can help reduce temperatures, but doing this will void your warranty. NVIDIA has still not responded to this debacle that may shorten the lifespan of their own cards. If you've been able to snag a new GPU over MSRP in the past year, good for you. If not, you're not alone. The next failure is the current GPU shortage. Short supply of graphics cards during the past year has been attributed to increased demand due to the pandemic, reduced factory capacity, also due to the pandemic, increased demand for Ampere and RDNA 2 cards due to great value and performance, scalping on the secondhand market, increased costs by Samsung and TSMC for NVIDIA that get passed on to the consumer, tariffs related to the US-China trade war, high chip allocation to RDNA 2 consoles, and the card's ability to effectively mine cryptocurrency, which has led to increased demand from miners who will pay any amount of money as long as they make a profit. It's a perfect storm of dreadful factors in the current market. Tools such as the EVGA, Newegg Shuffle, and NVIDIA LHR have tried to increase stock, but seemingly to little avail. Multi-billion-dollar companies such as NVIDIA may claim they care about their consumers, but they do not, as evidenced by their lack of action to increase supply in a meaningful way. Now, of course, they do care about some consumers, but do they care about gamers? No, it's a very small percentage of their market. With the company achieving high sales figures, even NVIDIA has predicted that the shortage will continue through all of 2022. Alright guys, we're on to the top 4 now, so it's about to get real juicy. Microstar International, or MSI, has been producing high-quality motherboards for a long time, with Gaming Plus and Tomahawk boards currently being fan favorites. However, when MSI launched their budget and mid-range X570 boards in 2019, they were met with ridicule. As noted by Hardware Unboxed, who tend to expose a lot of this nonsense from companies, the budget X570A Pro had VRM and PCB temperatures over 100 degrees, which is straight up unsafe. However, even the historically good Gaming Edge and Gaming Carbon models had the same issues. The Gaming Edge and Gaming Pro Carbon reached temps well over 100 degrees as well. The Tomahawk and Gaming Plus also looked pretty bad upon launch. Prolonged use at these temps could lead to motherboard failure and system instability. MSI Australia, however, actually reached out to Hardware Unboxed right after the video was released, and the X570 boards have all since been fixed. MSI even flew out an executive to meet with Steve and discuss the findings. MSI accepted returns and gave refunds on all these motherboards. The brand promptly launched the X570 Unify, a new version of the Gaming Carbon, which was much better and more in line with its price point in terms of performance. However, there is another side to the story. In a double failure, Tom's Hardware, in an attempt to test the thermals for themselves, and presumably find the same findings as Hardware Unboxed, claimed that the X570 Gaming Plus actually achieved great VRM temps during gaming. They refuted the claims made by every other reputable reviewer, and they use a 3700X, which is not a stress test by any means. Tom's Hardware also claimed that buyers of boards under $200 would likely never overclock or upgrade to a better processor, which is unequivocally false as proven by me. And MSI lists support for the 3900X on their budget X570 boards, so who's got egg on their face now? I mean, come on, Tom's Hardware. The quote review made a price comparison to the X570 Tough Wi-Fi, despite the standard Tough model costing the same as the Gaming Plus and clearly being better. It's absurd that the editors at Tom's Hardware allowed this ridiculous piece to be posted. The author of the review even called Hardware Unboxed liars and trolls in an email. This is just absolutely unbelievable. The email was to a former colleague, not to Hardware Unboxed or to the media or anything like that, but still. This is just crazy. Of course, the original failure is MSI motherboards. They dealt with the issue very well, and then Tom's Hardware had to go screw it up. So. All right, we're on to the third worst company/product, PC company/product fail that I know about. So, out of all the shady business conducted by some hardware companies, reviewer manipulation and bribery grinds my gears the most. I may be biased as a reviewer, but the sheer immorality of the practice and the negative impact it can cause for consumers is reprehensible. I'd like to specifically target MSI, NVIDIA, and LG for their recent scandals involving Tech Team GB and Hardware Unboxed, respectively. In mid-2020, tech review site Tech Team GB was threatened the loss of sponsorship and review samples from MSI if they did not remove the word disappointing from the title of an MSI laptop review. Prior to posting the review, MSI had the outlet hold the review for several weeks, offering to pay them not to post it. Tech Team GB then received a call from AMD. MSI had requested that AMD pressure Tech Team GB into taking the review off YouTube. The AMD representative, luckily, sided with Tech Team GB, but MSI's reputation took quite the tumble after that incident. Later that year, out of the blue, NVIDIA emailed Hardware Unboxed, informing them that they would no longer be sending them review samples because the outlet was focusing too much on standard rasterization and not ray tracing. NVIDIA then said they would revisit the issue, quote, should your editorial direction change, end quote. The email was addressed from Brian Del Rizzo, a higher up at the company, but was likely sent by a low-tier marketing person. NVIDIA rescinded their decision after receiving community backlash and scathing criticism from Linus Tech Tips, Gamers Nexus, Jay's 2 Cents, and more. This incident shows that NVIDIA is extremely out of touch with what gamers really care about. Continuing with the trend of targeting Hardware Unboxed and Hardware Unboxed fighting back and winning, that's just what LG did earlier this year. Even Jay's 2 cents has called LG, quote, pushy, but LG stepped over the line when they demanded editing rights on Hardware Unboxed 32GP850. The first red flag was when LG slapped a last-minute embargo with no end date on the monitor, after the embargo had already been lifted once and Hardware Unboxed had already finished testing. Hardware Unboxed did not agree to the second embargo. LG said they were having internal issues. When Hardware Unboxed asked when the embargo would be lifted, it took LG a month to respond. In their response, after Hardware Unboxed followed up, LG gave a list of new guidelines that had to be followed in 32GP850 reviews. The ridiculous guidelines included not comparing the monitor to any past LG monitors, only using the UFO test with specific settings, and specific requirements for a mode to use for contrast ratio testing. In the same email, LG said they required reviewers to share drafts of the review with them, drafts of the review with them. They offered compensation for sending the drafts. When Hardware Unboxed declined to follow these guidelines, LG said the review could not be published. LG swiftly responded after intense public backlash, stating that the subsidiary that Hardware Unboxed dealt with would no longer give out review samples, that all embargoes would be discussed before testing is conducted, and that video format and expectations would also be discussed and made clear ahead of time. These 3 instances of manipulation are very bad looks for each of these previously well-respected brands. Alright guys, we're on to the second worst fail on this list. In late 2020, NZXT recalled its H1 case after fewer than 10 units had riser cables that caught on fire. NZXT believed the issue to be the screws causing a short circuit, but this was not the issue. After NZXT continued H1 sales without fixing the real issue, Steve from Gamers Nexus investigated the issue over multiple videos, and he found that the problem was in fact the PCB design of the included riser cable that came with the case. By the way, Steve let the company know privately before releasing the video, but they ignored him and then tried to get out a quick statement before the video was released. They did this to try to look like the good guys, rather than really addressing the problem. This was very shady on their part, by the way. I really recommend you watch Steve's videos on the NZXT H1. They made vague promises of upgrades, but provided no further details, so GN released the video. When NZXT issued the first recall, they replaced the riser cable's metal screw with a nylon one. The riser cable short would not occur with the nylon screw, but with the metal screw it did occur. Again, this was not because of the screw being metal, but rather the design of the riser. So this was still a big issue that NZXT now had to address, because people could just swap out the nylon screw for the metal screw, they could forget about it or anything like that. There's still an issue with the cable itself, right? Following an unsatisfactory marketing-heavy statement that proved that they knew the riser cable had an issue and not the screws, NZXT went on to eventually ship out new riser cables that did not suffer from the same issue. Still, a fire is a very serious problem, and NZXT easily could have killed someone with their carelessness. Before I get on to number 1, I'd like to give 2 honorable mentions. The first is an issue with EVGA 3090 GPUs that got bricked by a game made by Amazon called New World. Upon the first reports of the game breaking GPUs, people believed it was the game's fault for putting too much load on the GPU. In fact, it was EVGA's fault. Before it was even known that it was EVGA's fault, EVGA still replaced the fried cards with no questions asked. EVGA investigated and then released a statement saying that soldering around the MOSFET circuit was done poorly, causing 24 EVGA cards to break when playing New World. They specifically broke doing New World because of a lack of a frame rate limiter. EVGA guys, great company, phenomenal response to this issue. They're just great all around. They really don't mess up too often, so great job EVGA. I also want to note, before I get on to the second honorable mention, I just realized I forgot about the 5700 XT driver issues, the RDNA 1 driver issues. Maybe I'll cover that in another video, but I did unfortunately forget about that for this one. Forgive me on that one, guys. The second honorable mention also has to do with bricked 30 series GPUs. Not exactly bricked, but anyways. The great POSCAP vs MLCC debacle of late 2020 boiled down to this. A bunch of Zotac Trinity 3080s and other models to a lesser extent started crashing constantly, and Igor's lab noticed that the cards that were crashing were all POSCAP designs. This is a type of capacitor, by the way. People jumped to conclusions based on this finding. The crashing occurred when the cards exceeded 2 GHz, something all 3080s should be able to do, exceed 2 GHz. While downclocking the cards did solve the crashing issue, nobody wants to run their cards slower, thus the problem persisted. MLCC capacitors, which are better at high frequencies than POSCAPs, but are not always better than POSCAPs, which is important to note. So the MLCCs were featured on cards that were not crashing, such as the TUF models. Der Bauer found that at least one array, 2 out of 6, of MLCCs could increase stability at high frequencies. All Zotac did was follow NVIDIA's base spec, and it turns out that it wasn't either of their faults, but the public went into a frenzy over the capacitors. Gear Seekers then found that the most stable cards he tested were using POSCAPs, suggesting that the crashing problem can occur with either capacitor type. It turns out it was an issue with the graphics drivers, and when companies came out with new driver updates, the issue was gone and has since been largely forgotten. You probably saw this coming, but number one on my list of the craziest hardware company fails is Gigabyte's exploding power supplies. Now, you could swap around the NZXT, the H1 fires and the Gigabyte exploding power supplies, but the exploding power supplies affected a lot more people, so we'll get into that. The Gigabyte P850GM and P750GM were found by Gamers Nexus to literally explode in many cases, with others arriving dead out of the box. In fact, 50% of the 750-watt models he tested failed. Steve also fried a Gigabyte 3080 during the PSU testing, but it is not known whether this was related to the PSU itself. Gigabyte claimed that GN was triggering the overpower protection, or OPP, at high wattages under extreme load. This was completely false, as GN only triggered the OPP once during testing, which should not cause a PSU to fail. OPP is a protection that enables when a PSU is drawing more power than it is supposed to, allowing it to provide higher wattages to parts for short periods of time. In response, Gigabyte is issuing a software fix by decreasing the OPP on the aforementioned PSU models. They are also accepting returns for all GP P850GM and GP P750GM units. Like the NZXT Razer fire, this had the potential to end very badly for people unfortunate enough to have bought these PSUs. But unlike the NZXT issue, it actually did end badly. Hundreds of Newegg and Amazon reviews claim that the PSU fried their entire system, costing them thousands of dollars. In a twist, Newegg also received harsh criticism from the PCMR community over the issue, since they had been bundling these bad PSUs with Ampere and RDNA 2 cards to get rid of their stock of these PSUs. The PSUs couldn't even handle the cards they were bundled with, which made this even more mind-boggling. Newegg is accepting all returns of Gigabyte PSUs, but with a big catch. If you bought them as a part of a bundle deal with a new GPU, you have to send back the GPU as well to get a refund on the power supply. That's absolutely insane, and a bad response by Newegg. Of course, the main player at fault here is Gigabyte for literally making 2 exploding PSUs. I'd expect something like this from RaidMax, but Gigabyte is a huge company that I thought made good products. Turns out, I was mistaken. Well, what a ride. These are the top 10, or rather bottom 10, PC tech fails of all time. As I stated earlier, I may have missed some because I am new in the scene, so let me know if I should ever do another piece in the series. Like I mentioned, I unfortunately completely forgot about the RDNA 1 driver issues when I was doing the research for this piece, but anyways. Hopefully companies will learn from these 10, 12 with honorable mentions, mistakes, and make better products. Hope you enjoyed the video. This has been Isaiah with FTW Tech, and yeah, see you guys.